A Halloween to Remember. It was a cool October evening, and the leaves were falling from the trees. The orange, yellow, and red leaves covered the ground like a soft, colorful blanket. In a small town, the Johnson family was getting ready for Halloween, just like every year. Anna, who was 10 years old, loved Halloween. She loved everything about it, dressing up in costumes, going trick-or-treating, and carving pumpkins. She had spent the whole week deciding what to wear. This year, she wanted to be a witch. She had a long black dress, a tall pointy hat, and even a broomstick. She couldn't wait to put on her costume. Her little brother, Tommy, who was 6, was just as excited. He had chosen to dress up as a superhero. His costume was bright red with a big yellow star on the front. He loved pretending to fly around the house, saving people from imaginary monsters. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, were busy decorating the house. They hung fake spider webs on the front porch and put up paper bats in the windows. Mrs. Johnson placed a big, smiling pumpkin outside the front door, and Mr. Johnson hung a ghost decoration from the tree. The house looked spooky but fun, perfect for Halloween night. That evening, the family sat together at the dinner table, eating warm pumpkin soup. The smell of cinnamon, nutmeg, and fresh bread filled the house, making everything feel cozy and comforting. Outside, the sky was getting dark, and they could see the full moon starting to rise.
I can't wait to go trick-or-treating,
Tommy said, bouncing in his seat. His eyes sparkled with excitement.
Me too.
Anna agreed. She was thinking about all the candy they would get.
I wonder how much we'll collect this year.
Mrs. Johnson smiled at her children.
We'll have fun tonight.
She said,
But remember, Halloween isn't just about candy. It's also a time for family. We should spend time together and enjoy the night.
Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement.
Yes, and don't forget to be polite when you go to people's houses. Always say thank you when they give you candy. It's important to be kind.
Anna and Tommy both nodded. They knew that being polite was important, even on Halloween. Their parents always reminded them to be kind to others. After dinner, it was time to get dressed. Anna went to her room and put on her witch costume. She wore a long, flowing black dress, a big pointy hat, and carried her little broomstick. She looked in the mirror and smiled.
I look just like a real witch,
She said to herself, feeling proud. Tommy was already in his superhero costume, running around the house pretending to fly. His cape flapped behind him as he jumped from couch to couch.
I'm going to save the world tonight.
He shouted, laughing. Their parents came into the room and smiled.
You both look amazing.
Mrs. Johnson said, taking out her phone to snap a picture.
Let's take a few pictures before we go outside.
They all went outside to the front yard, where Mr. Johnson had already cleaned out the big pumpkin. Now, it was time to carve the face.
Can I draw the face?
Tommy asked, his eyes wide with excitement.
Of course.
Mr. Johnson said. He handed Tommy a black marker. Tommy carefully drew a big, happy face on the pumpkin. The eyes were round, and the mouth had a wide smile with 2 square teeth. Anna laughed as she watched him.
It's going to be the friendliest jack-o'-lantern ever.
she said. Together, they helped their dad carve out the face using a little plastic knife. They worked slowly and carefully, making sure the pumpkin looked just right. When they finished, they placed a small candle inside and lit it. Together, they helped their dad carve out the face using a little plastic knife. They worked slowly and carefully, making sure the pumpkin looked just right. When they finished, they placed a small candle inside and lit it.
That looks wonderful, Mrs. Johnson said. Good job, everyone.
Now it was time for trick-or-treating. The kids grabbed their candy bags, and the whole family set off down the street. The neighborhood was filled with other families and children in costumes. Some kids were dressed as pirates, others as princesses or scary monsters. Everyone was laughing and running from house to house, shouting,
Trick or treat.
The Johnsons walked together, with Anna and Tommy leading the way. At each house, they knocked on the door and smiled when people gave them candy.
Thank you.
They said after every house, just like their parents had taught them. Some of the houses were decorated with spooky lights and music. At one house, there was even a fog machine that made the front yard look like it was covered in mist. Tommy squeezed Anna's hand.
That house looks really scary.
He whispered. Anna smiled and squeezed his hand back.
It's just pretend.
She said.
Remember, Halloween is about having fun. Nothing here is real.
Tommy nodded and felt a little braver. They continued down the street, collecting candy and laughing as they went. Their bags were getting heavier with every house. After a while, they reached the last house on the block. It was an old, quiet house with big trees in the yard. The house looked dark, and the front porch light was off. Tommy hesitated.
Do you think they're giving out candy?
He asked, looking up at Anna. Anna looked at the house, and then back at her brother.
I don't know.
She said.
But we can go together. We'll be brave.
Holding hands, they walked up the path to the front door. The trees around them rustled in the wind, and the sound of dry leaves crunched under their feet. When they knocked on the door, there was a long pause. Just when they were about to turn around and leave, the door opened slowly. An old man with gray hair and a kind face stood in the doorway. He smiled gently at them.
Happy Halloween.
He said in a soft voice.
I don't get many visitors here.
Anna and Tommy smiled back.
Trick or treat.
They said in unison. The old man chuckled.
You two are the first children to visit me tonight.
He said.
Here, take some candy.
He reached into a bowl and handed them each a big chocolate bar.
Thank you.
They said, their voices full of surprise and happiness. The old man's smile grew wider.
You're welcome.
He said.
Have a wonderful night.
As they walked back to their parents, Tommy looked up at Anna.
That wasn't so scary after all.
He said with a grin. Anna smiled.
See, we can be brave when we're together.
The family continued walking home, talking about all the fun they had. When they got back to their house, they sat down in the living room and emptied their candy bags onto the floor. There were chocolates, lollipops, and all sorts of treats scattered everywhere. Tommy's eyes widened in delight.
Look at all this candy.
He said, reaching for a piece of chocolate.
We'll have to save some for later.
Mr. Johnson said with a laugh.
You can't eat it all at once.
The family spent the rest of the evening sorting through the candy and sharing their favorite moments from the night. Tommy kept talking about the scary house with the fog machine, while Anna couldn't stop smiling about the friendly old man at the last house. As they got ready for bed, Anna thought about what her parents had said earlier.
Mom, Dad,
She asked.
why do we always talk about being kind on Halloween?
Mrs. Johnson sat down beside her on the bed.
Halloween is a fun time for dressing up and getting candy.
She said.
But it's also a time to show kindness to others. Not everyone has a lot of candy or decorations, and some people might feel lonely. By being polite and friendly, we can make others feel happy.
Anna thought about the old man at the last house.
Like the man who gave us chocolate bars?
Mr. Johnson smiled.
Exactly. You were kind to him, and it made him feel good. That's what Halloween is really about, not just the costumes and candy, but the kindness we share with others.
Anna nodded, feeling warm inside. The next morning, when Anna and Tommy woke up, they looked outside. The jack-o'-lantern was still glowing softly on the porch, even though it was daylight. It reminded them of the fun they had the night before, and the kindness they had shared with everyone they met. It had truly been a Halloween to remember.